Welcome to episode 5 of Back to Beverly, and thanks for tuning in. My next guest is someone I've known since grade school, and someone who I've grown to admire greatly over the years for his work and commitment to destigmatizing the conversation around mental health. Peiman Raf, who is a co-founder and CEO of Madhappy, has not only created one of the most well-known clothing brands of our generation, but also leverages his platform to raise awareness and help those who struggle with mental health. We talk about the many iconic Madhappy collaborations, the future of the brand, including their physical retail presence, the launch of their foundation, and much, much more. Here's my interview with Peiman. Please enjoy. All right, are we good in there? We're getting the thumbs up. Okay, cool. All right. My next guest is the co-founder and CEO of an iconic streetwear brand that has risen to international prominence since launching 5 years ago. Their brand has been featured in publications of Vogue, such as Vogue and Women's Wear Daily, and clothes worn by some of the most recognizable names in the world. Since launching the brand, he has been instrumental in the rollout of a mental health resource platform as well as a foundation that benefits their efforts towards destigmatizing mental health and creating more conversation around it. He also co-hosts a podcast with one of his co-founders where they discuss their personal journeys with other influential creators and celebrities. I honestly don't know where he finds the time, but please join me in welcoming the co-founder and CEO of Madhappy and Beverly High grad class of 2012, Peiman Raf. Peiman, thanks for coming on the show.
Of course, happy to be here.
How does it feel to be back at Beverly? Did you get some nostalgia walking through the halls?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they changed the floors, I noticed.
Yeah.
But it's always good to be back.
I think maybe the paint too, I noticed. But yeah, it's fun to be back after all these years. I mean, this is 10 years for you, I think.
Yeah, it's about to be 10 years. The bathrooms are the same,
Yep.
unfortunately.
Still gross.
But yeah, it's great to be back.
Are they, before we get it, are you guys working on your 10-year reunion? Have you heard anything?
Yeah, I have not heard anything. I'm asking around, so
Yeah.
hopefully.
Do you look back fondly on your high school years?
Yeah, I love my high school years. I always say, like, I feel pretty lucky. I think a lot of people I talk to now, most of their best friends they made in college, but I feel like I made so many in high school, and
Yeah.
I think that's pretty rare. So
Yeah.
I always look back fondly.
Beverly's special in that way. I think my group of friends and the kids you graduated with, we're all still close to this day. So
For sure.
unlike, like you were mentioning, unlike other high schools. So you end up going to Michigan following graduation. What did you study at Michigan, and do you think your time at Beverly prepared you for success in school?
Yeah, I think I was definitely like very like school minded growing up. Like school just like came naturally to me, and I was always like pretty focused on doing well, but also like other things like sports and social aspects were important. So like that's sort of why I chose Michigan. I feel like it had the perfect balance of like a really good business school, good social scene, good sports, and those are like the things I think I learned at Beverly, and then obviously prepared me for going to Michigan.
So I mentioned in the open, you're co-founder and CEO of Madhappy, which has become an iconic brand known worldwide. Can you walk the listeners through the birth of Madhappy? Where did you guys come up with the idea? And I mentioned co-founder. There are 4 of you, is that right?
Yeah, it's an interesting story because my brother also went here, class of 2014.
Okay.
And we were very different in that, like, I love school and he hated school. And so he was always like more creative, and Mason, who had been our friend who didn't go to Beverly, his brother Matt did.
Yep.
He had them two had started a brand together in high school, just like trying to make clothes in LA, which I think a lot of people have tried.
Yeah.
And you know, it didn't really go anywhere at that time, and they were thinking of starting something new, and this was around when I was graduating from Michigan. And we sort of came together around this idea that Mason had thought of this amazing name in Madhappy in a text to someone.
Yeah.
And Mason had struggled a lot with his mental health growing up, never knowing his dad growing up, just a lot of challenging times. And for him, it meant trying to be like optimistic despite the challenges we all face. And that was really like the birth of this like name and like feeling that we felt from Madhappy, and was like the early spark to deciding to start something.
Got it. So you're the CEO. Can you explain a little bit about your role and what your main focus is for the brand, sort of day to day?
Yeah, so a lot's happened, of course, in 5 years.
Yep.
I think at the beginning, everyone's doing a little bit of everything, and having 4 founders early on is helpful because you can do a lot with 4 people. But I think as we grew, we were bootstrapped for about 2.5 years. We raised a round that LVMH led in 2019. And then since then, as we've been growing and as the team's been growing, I think we had to split out our responsibilities more. And I feel like the CEO role is one that's really focused both internally in terms of like hiring, process, culture, building a company that people want to work for and want to like stay working for, as well as like helping build like the strategy for the future, how we're going to continue to grow and make a big impact over time.
Probably a lot of what you learned in your years at Michigan, yeah?
Yeah, I think, I always think now that like school, like I didn't really like learn, it doesn't like relate one-to-one to what you do. It's like fit. Until you do it, you're not going to know. But I do think like the experiences you go through, like playing sports in high school, things like that are more related to like trying to start a business and like the challenges that come with that.
Yeah. So you've done a tremendous job and cornered the market on very cool, unique collaborations with very iconic brands, especially here in LA, including Apple Pan, John and Vinny's, the Lakers, the Dodgers. You guys did Pixar, Toy Story, I think. Yeah. I think there was a Curb collaboration. I know there's one I'm missing that I loved. Were those part of the overall brand plan when you guys launched Madhappy, or how did those partnerships and collabs come to life?
Yeah, I think we were definitely, that was not part of the plan in launching. Interesting. We wanted to build a brand that was more focused on like positivity and optimism, but was still cool. Whereas a lot of the brands we grew up with were sort of like dark, negative, like don't come in the store. And as we started doing that, people were very receptive towards it, both like our consumer as well as like other brands, celebrities that have worn and supported the brand. And I think for us, it became about how do we tell really good stories around optimism, around mental health with brands that we feel like are aligned. And that's sort of how those came to be. What
do those deals look like? I mean, are they excited to partner with me? I imagine they are. Do you guys pay a license fee to use them? Is there a split of revenue on the back end? I'm just curious how they sort of, is that something that you work on as CEO? Or are you sort of the mastermind?
Yeah, I definitely work on that, but I think each one is different depending on like the type of brand, like how big they are, right? Some are more like corporate in nature. Yeah. But I feel like for us, it's always like there's a clear mental health story to tell together. There's a clear story around optimism to tell, and then we tell it in a big way, and we try to bring as much attention to the space as possible.
One thing I was curious about as I was driving over was, so obviously you partner with a number of brands. Have you thought about partnering with individuals? Like for instance, and the reason I ask is like, so take Naomi Osaka, for instance, who's a grand champion of tennis, and she obviously has been very vocal about mental health and dealing with the media and stuff. Is there a thought about maybe potentially partnering with individuals moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think definitely there's some stuff that we're working on the individual side, because I think it's not limited just to brands now, right? Which I think is amazing, and you can partner in so many different ways. Like back when we did partnerships with the Apple Pan and things like that, people thought that was crazy, you know, and unique, I guess. And so trying to do more things like that. And then obviously having other properties like the podcast, like localoptimist.com, where we can work with people like that on telling stories, I think is also important.
So before we move on, I want to ask you, are there any secret collaborations or unannounced that you can share on the podcast?
I think there's always a lot of stuff that we're working on. I think LA specifically, we're in Q1 of next year, we're going to open our first like permanent store. So there's going to be a cool like food and beverage component of that, which will be exciting, and with a great partner. So that's something we're excited for.
What part of town, just approximately?
It's going to be on Melrose. Like,
cool. Right, like where you guys have done before.
Yeah, right around where we are now.
So you mentioned permanent store, but you guys have done a lot of brick and mortar pop-ups previously. How have you determined where those go, and does each location sort of get a fun custom line that goes with those pop-ups?
Yeah, so I think early on, especially in 2017, everyone was talking about online only, and we felt like the retail in-person experience was still important. And so we've always done that temporary store model since the early days, and I feel like being in the best places at the best times of the year is how we've tried to position it.
Got it.
Whether that means LA, New York, Miami, kind of all across the country, and always something special that you can only get in the store to get people to obviously be excited about wanting to come.
It's interesting what you guys have been able to do, which is build a community online that also translates to your store. And I used to work for Rick Caruso, and he preached that a lot, that like the brick and mortar experience was so important, and the brands that did it well were going to survive. And
I think he might have contributed to the first round. Is that right? Is he?
Yeah, Rick and Justin are definitely big supporters of
Cool.
Madhappy.
Cool.
We're actually going to be working with them on some stuff in the coming months. So
very cool.
Should be,
it's exciting.
should
I'm
be
happy to
exciting.
hear that. So on the pop-up stuff, obviously you mentioned trying to be in the right places during the right parts of the year. The lines, like for instance, I was in Aspen earlier this year, visited the pop-up. There was a ski collection in there, which was very cool. Obviously, that made sense for the store in Aspen. Was that also available elsewhere, like online or in the other pop-ups?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, obviously, I don't know if there was one at the same time.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think most things are available online and then in a store as well.
Got it.
But there are certain things like, the Aspen hoodie or the Aspen jacket where they won't be available everywhere. And the idea is obviously market specific, but also just time and place. Like you have to be there to be able to get something. We think that that's a cool part of the experience.
Yeah, sort of a reason to drive people to the store and experience it in real life. Yeah. So I'm curious your thoughts on what you attribute the success of the brand to. Obviously, collections are well made, well designed. The collaborations are very cool. But do you think the recent focus on mental health awareness, especially over the last few years, pandemic, huge rise, has played a role in the popularity of Madhappy?
Yeah, I think in any success, and of course, we feel like we have a long way to go, and it's still just the beginning. But I think there's so many elements. One, I think we're very fortunate to have a great name. I think the name's super powerful, but also stands for what the brand is, and so that's half the battle.
Yeah.
The other half is we started talking about mental health in 2017, and no one was really talking about it back then.
Sure.
But each year, the conversation has picked up. Of course, accelerated by things like the pandemic. Athletes, entertainers now talking about it more openly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's this great tailwind behind this movement that we feel like we're a part of, and we're the ones just trying to make it cool to talk about mental health, cool for it to be part of your daily life. And the more we do that, I think hopefully it all continues.
That was going to be my next question was, have people rallied behind the mission of the brand? And it sounds like you sort of have found that.
For sure. I mean, I think people want to support brands that they align with, right? Not just of course people have to think the product's cool, the product's great, all that, but I think they want to get behind optimism. They want to get behind mental health. They want to get behind whatever the brand is pushing. And so I think that it's an important part of brands of the future.
Cool. You mentioned it earlier, but the Local Optimist blog was the blog you guys launched as a sort of a resource platform for mental health.
Yeah.
And I was reading something on there that one of your co-founders, Mason, wrote, which was that you guys, about plans for the future and trying to reach more population worldwide and trying to spread the message. How do you achieve that while also maintaining sort of the aspirational piece of the brand? And are there any future plans to release collections with price points that might be a little lower and more accessible to the masses?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, we've always wanted everyone to be able to get something from Madhappy, and we made certain decisions around product quality that force us to price in specific ways. But I think there are more and more products that we want to have that are more accessible. And then it's also about adding things that are completely free, things like the podcast, like the newsletter, like Local Optimist, that you can just engage with, and it's at no cost. You can come to the store, experience the store, and buy stickers if you want, right? And so I think doing that more and getting that message out more is definitely one of our leading priorities.
So offering a little something for everybody, whether it's a hat or a sticker or something.
100%.
Got it. When I was preparing I knew we were going to sit down, I was listening to an episode you did with Lindsay Carter, who formerly Bresnik, who was also a Beverly grad, on her podcast, Ready, Set, Spill. Have you ever given any thought to, and I think this is so cool, to the fact that a handful of iconic clothing brands were founded and run by former students who were all at Beverly at the same time? And for those listening, I'm referring to Lindsay Carter, who obviously I just mentioned is the founder of Set Active, Taylor Offer, who you guys talked about, and was between us in school, is the co-founder of Feet, which was a sock brand and has evolved into sort of loungewear. And then Joseph Perez is the founder of Carey, which is worn by the likes of Justin Bieber and Hailey Bieber. So have you ever had any thoughts of that we were sort of all here at the same time, and now there's these iconic brands out there?
Yeah, it's pretty funny because I feel like most of us wouldn't have thought we'd be doing what we're doing now. But yeah, I mean, I think Beverly's pretty special for that reason. And in every year, there's just people doing amazing things, which is awesome.
It's been fun to follow the stories, and I wanted to ask you that question just because I was like, wow, I mean, when you really think about it, 4 really cool brands, people coast to coast know about them. I mean, when I scroll, talking about Madhappy in particular, when I'm scrolling Instagram, like I see people worldwide and I'm like, is that a Madhappy hat? And they're wearing, I'm like, this is kind of crazy. Does that ever dawn on you that like people around the world wear your stuff?
Yeah, I think it is crazy, and still like it's like very like gratifying or amazing each time I see it, like in random places, like airports or random schools, or being out not in LA. I think it's like so eye-opening, especially after the pandemic, like finally like getting to like travel again and then seeing it. And the brand grew a lot in that time, I think is amazing. And hopefully we could just continue that. So definitely yes.
Yeah. So I got a couple more for you before I let you go. In your role as CEO, do you give yourself time to dream, and do you think about the evolution of the brand? Like, do you take a couple hours out of your week and say, okay, this is gonna be my time to think, okay, what's next for Madhappy?
Yeah, definitely, and that's something that you have to do more as you get bigger, because I think it's earlier days it was very easy for me to just get bogged down in like the day-to-day, because it's so important and you do need to do that. But then your job as a CEO, but really as a founder, is like to put the right team in place to then be able to like focus on the future of the brand. And so we're always doing that. We're always just trying to like get better, improve a little bit, make a little bit of a bigger impact each year, especially on the mental health side of what we're doing and offering. So yeah, definitely a big part of it.
Yeah. So we talked about the pop-ups. You've gone from, and I was listening to your podcast, which I highly encourage everybody listening to this. It's the Madhappy podcast, and you guys go into great detail, and it's pretty raw, and talk about your own mental health journeys.
For sure.
But you talked about how you guys launched the brand here in LA with a big party on Robertson. So you've gone from hosting parties to pop-ups, iconic collaborations, now a huge mental health content platform. What's next for you guys?
Yeah, I think more of the same, just like how do we make the world a more optimistic place. I think that's been sort of our goal since the beginning. And as we've grown, we've seen new ways of being able to do that. I think day one, we wouldn't have been able to tell you all of that, but I think you look at what a Patagonia has done for sustainability over 70 years, or Nike for physical health and movement, like why can't we do that for mental health? And so I think that's the journey. Hopefully we'll be on for a long time, and hopefully we could check back in and see where we're at in 5 more years and 10 after that.
It's exciting stuff, and commendable for sure. So we talked, and there are plans for a permanent brick and mortar soon. Are there any plans for additional pop-ups outside of LA, new cities outside of where you guys have been before? And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been New York, Miami, Aspen, LA. Has there been any other pop-ups?
Yeah, those have been the main ones. I think each year we'll continue to do some of the temporary ones, as well as like additional flagships, both in the US and now increasingly abroad. So
cool.
I think that's how we're thinking about it. The brand's grown beyond just the US, and we've never thought about it as like just a US type brand. I think the name is pretty universal, the message is universal, and so hopefully we could bring it as many places as we can physically, and then also digitally. I think there's a lot of room to be creative in where people can wear Madhappy, and outside of just the physical.
Speaking of digitally, did you guys have to learn, and I imagine it was a huge learning process, but when the world shut down 2 years ago, did you guys have to learn how to sort of push the brand more digitally? Or, or you guys were pretty successful.
We were digital, but it's a good question, because we were always used to doing both, and like physical was definitely like more in our wheelhouse. We had never been used to like just online, only marketing online, only talking to people online. And I think in the pandemic, we really had to learn how to talk to our audience, talk to our consumer, and just like make sure that like we were still there for them, and also just like adjust the messaging. It wasn't all about us at that point. Like we specifically did like no press in 2020, because we were just like, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't like feed what we're trying to do.
Right. You mentioned international pop-ups, London, Paris. What are there set plans yet, or is still
there's a lot
air?
coming. There's a lot coming.
Okay.
But those are two good guesses. Places in Asia as well.
Cool.
So just there's a lot of places we still need to bring Madhappy to.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see where you guys go. You guys recently launched the Madhappy Foundation, which gives 1% of proceeds from clothing sales to mental health awareness. Can you talk a little bit about that? What do you guys? Have you guys gotten a good reception so far?
Yeah, I think very early on we started working with amazing organizations, donating, sometimes percent of proceeds from specific releases, or just at the end of the year, or supporting different like research studies. Like we have one with the University of Pennsylvania right now, and so closer towards the end of last year, we thought like creating a foundation that gives us more flexibility in what types of things we're giving grants to, what types of studies we're funding, I think was the long-term goal for us. And so I think the timing made sense. We launched it this year. It allows us to also bring in donations from our consumers if they want to add donations, you know, and it gives us more flexibility because so many people were coming to us like, how can I support?
Yeah.
And we didn't have a direct way besides leading them to other great organizations. So we're excited about it.
And there was a donation to a research study at Penn or something, am I right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we did that last October, and we're basically doing a study with them that we funded to look for tools for like student mental health, like how can they better take care of their mental health. It's focused on college kids, but it can be adapted to like high schools and really like students all over the world. So more of a tangible, like people who like and support Madhappy can also benefit tangibly from like the toolkits we'll be putting out with, of course, amazing universities. Yeah,
amazing work. I'm curious, so you guys host your own podcast, and I've listened to a few episodes, and it had some amazing guests, including Lindsey Vonn, I think Logic was on there, what was I listening to, Alexis Ren today. Are you amazed, and do you ever give any thought to the fact that so many people, people that are in the public spotlight are willing to share these stories about their past and what they deal with?
Yeah, I think one of the things we realized about podcasts, of course, like everyone has a podcast these days,
everybody and their mother.
Yeah. But for us, like, we wanted to do it because we thought, of course, these people have done podcasts, but like, no one's asking them about this stuff.
Right.
And as soon as we started doing it, you might interview someone who you don't know much about, is like famous or whatever, but they have such an amazing story that like they've never shared before. And I think bringing those stories to light more is important because it makes everyone feel like they're on the same playing field, right? Like just because someone has a lot of money or is famous, like that doesn't mean that they don't struggle. And I think people often think that.
Me too. I'm guilty of it because you look at these people and you see them online and you think, wow, their life's perfect, whatever. But they're going through the same stuff. And I appreciate that you guys are bringing those stories to light and getting them to share it. It's been fascinating to listen to. So I got one more before I let you go, but obviously we're back here at Beverly, and it's been 10 years for you. By the way, have you been back since graduation?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. Well, your brother graduates, you were at his graduation.
My brother graduated after, and then I still support like Jarvis and the basketball team.
Oh, nice,
so,
cool. Yeah.
I do like coming back at times.
What would you say to your high school self if you could give one piece of advice?
Yeah, I think my one piece of general advice is like, I think early on in my life, I always thought like you had to follow like a certain path, you know, and if you're, you know, I'm definitely more like type A, like I want to like strive to like be really good or get better or like be the best I can, very competitive. And I think sometimes early on in life that can like narrow down like the opportunities you have because you're like, okay, like I need to study business undergrad, then I need to go into banking, then I need to do this. And I think being open to your curiosity earlier and taking those risks earlier. I was very fortunate in taking this risk to start Madhappy. It almost didn't happen. I guess that's a story for a different day. But I think those opportunities, the earlier you take the risks, that's like when it's least risky for you in the long run. And so I think that would be my advice to myself, to really anyone that asks me. That's what I say.
So you did mention banking, and I've heard the story, but I think it's fascinating of sort of how you ended up with Madhappy. Before we go, do you mind just telling that story quick?
Yeah, I'll tell the quick story. I mean, I think I grew up just like trying to like overachieve in high school and college. I got a good job in New York in banking, and like 2 months in I got like pretty sick, like nothing serious, but I had to like take a month or two off, so I came back to LA right around the time that like Noah and Mason were talking about Madhappy. And I think it was fortunate in that like, you know, I started helping them with it, and I decided to not go back to New York, but I didn't think I was going to be working on Madhappy. I was like, I'll just get a different job here. And eventually, like a few months down the road, I realized like, oh, like this is what I'm doing. And without that, without moving back, without getting sick, which felt like a low at the time, like this would have never started.
Yeah, so. I know I keep saying last one, but this is actually the last one. I asked, so I was telling you before the show, I had Celeste on, and her episode just came out recently. And I was asking her about her life, and I'm a big believer in everything in life happens for a reason, and you're on a path, and you know, it's just sort of like predestined and certain things happen. Have you thought about that in context of your own life, of like, maybe you don't get sick in New York,
Yeah.
Or you did and you moved home and that's how you end up. I mean, have you thought about that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think like you really can like manifest so many things for yourself if you do just like believe in what you're doing. And like you don't exactly need to know like what your dream job is or what but like to really believe in yourself is like a skill that you can develop over time. And then I think just trust whatever happens and keep believing and like be optimistic, like we say.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate the time. Thanks for coming back, and I hope you enjoyed this little trip back to Beverly.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks, Dillon.
Cool.
This was awesome.
Thanks again for listening. And just a reminder, if you enjoyed this interview, hit that subscribe button, leave me a review, and tell a friend. You can also find me on social at Back to Beverly on Instagram. Till next time, I'm your host, Dillon Curtis, signing off.
Did you press record?